the fertilized egg. In this single embattled cell lie the roots of a human mind. Within hours of its fertilization, the cell begins to divide, and divide again and again. Gradually, that first cell becomes a ball of hundreds of cells. They seem identical, but hidden within them is a chemical blueprint that controls what they will become. In response to some preset biological signal, the ball folds in on itself. Cells begin to assume roles, some as muscles and bone, some as heart and liver, some as part of the nervous system. A tube begins to form, the first step in the development of the brain. As the tube grows, a layer of cells appears. It's organized into neurons, which form the basis for all functions of the brain, and glial cells, which nourish the neurons and help them migrate to their destinations. They orchestrate a pattern of development that will emerge in the first stirrings of the human mind. By the 8th week, the structure of the brain has begun to emerge. On the right, a glial cell, the glue of the brain. On the left, a neuron, the future information processor. The glial cell is sending out its fibers to find the neuron, a dance that begins a major milestone in brain development.
The entire process is programmed by genes, but it is susceptible to changes in the environment. The interaction of neurons and glial cells represents a critical period of development. This is a time when the brain is most vulnerable. Teratogens, agents such as chemicals and viruses, can reach the embryo or fetus and cause harm. Recently, attention is turned toward just what those teratogens are, and what kind of potentially damaging effects they exert on the brain and mind.
April 26, 1986. The nuclear reactor at Chernobyl in the Soviet Union suffers a disastrous meltdown. 10 months later, scientists estimated that mental retardation among fetuses exposed to the radiation could be 5 times as common as in the general population. They based their estimates on the results of a catastrophe that had taken place more than 40 years before. The bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only killed hundreds of thousands of people, they irradiated countless vulnerable fetuses in critical periods of development. In the wake of the bombs, clues began to emerge as to just how radiation might affect the exquisite choreography of growing brain cells.
Well, the story about radiation-related brain damage actually began here shortly after the bombings. We soon recognized that children who had been exposed in utero, a small number of them, were severely retarded. The earlier analyses of the data tended to focus on conventional division of the gestational period into trimesters. We divided the gestational period into 4 intervals of time, which correspond to more or less separable periods of development of the brain. Once this was done, it became very clear that 80%, in large measure all of the cases of mental retardation, occurred to women who were in a specific stage of their pregnancy. That is, the fetus was between 8 and 16 weeks following conception. Now, we know from neurobiological evidence that that period is extremely critical because 2 fundamental events are occurring.
First, neurons continue to proliferate at the astonishing rate of 250,000 per minute. Second, the glial cells have formed a web of fibers, and the neurons actually crawl along the web to their final destinations. For fetuses in Hiroshima, radiation interrupted that journey.
Neurons have a specific date of birth, and they'll have a specific destination. And they do not migrate haphazardly. They have an address, and they move to that address in a highly choreographed sequence of events. And since we know that brain function critically follows brain position, cells have to be in the right place to do the right thing. Even though alive, even though in the general area they don't perform the proper function if they're not in the proper site.
Their crucial journey disrupted, the migrating neurons probably stop short of their intended destinations. These events have devastating repercussions for people whose mothers were exposed to high levels of radiation at a critical time in fetal development.
The birth and migration of neurons, two critical periods that are profoundly affected by radiation. But do other environmental insults also interfere with brain development? In 1751, William Hogarth etched Gin Lane, a portrait of despair. Among its horrors, a mother pouring liquor into a baby. Remarkably, science only began to recognize alcohol's effects on the fetus a few years ago.
Fetal alcohol syndrome was discovered by a resident in our department of pediatrics in 1970. Christy Ueland was doing a study of infants who were small for gestational age, infants who were born on term but were little. And among those children, she found a few children who looked alike, who were very small, who were all retarded, and whose mothers all had a history of heavy alcohol use.
Although the report met with skepticism, others confirmed that alcohol affected both body and brain. But what of the effect on the emerging mind? In Gothenburg, Sweden, Marita Aronson studied babies with fetal alcohol syndrome. She found that alcohol could cause damage in very subtle ways.
Many of these children have problems. They have hyperactivity, they have impulsiveness, they have temper tantrums, they have short memory span, they have perceptual disorders.
These shapes were copied by two children the same age, one normal, one with fetal alcohol syndrome. And here, a child with the syndrome who tried to draw a human figure simply couldn't stop drawing noses and eyes, a sign of damage to the frontal lobe of the brain. The behavioral effects of alcohol range from the most subtle to the most severe. But what does it actually do to the brain? In the 1970s, Sterling Claren came up on a clue.
At that time, we had the opportunity to study the first autopsy case of an infant with fetal alcohol syndrome. And we were able to get the first real visual and graphic evidence of how devastating this condition could be to the human brain. This is a picture of that first brain compared to a normal human infant brain. The first thing that's obvious is that the brain is very small. But there's more wrong with this brain than that. You can see that the gyri, which are the normal brain squiggles, are really rather flat and thick. This is a cross-section of a normal infant brain. These are the size of the ventricles, the holes in the center of the brain. And you can see how thick the white matter is and how the gyri kind of form convolutions around the brain. This is the exact same section of that brain of a child with fetal alcohol syndrome. You don't have to be a neuropathologist to see that every single part of that brain is malformed. The holes in the center are way too big because there's so little white matter to fill them in. The brain density is really reduced, and that normal convolutional pattern of the brain has been lost. We get a clue to understanding how this kind of a malformation could come about by looking at the tissue microscopically. This is a section of the cortex of the cerebrum. The normal surface of this brain is in fact here. And then there's the stuff that's covering the brain that looks like it's in fact erupting through the cortex. This is in fact a malformation. It's a hodgepodge of all the different cell lines, all the different brain elements that go into creating the brain. It's as if the cells of the brain, when they were migrating to their final homes, didn't know when to stop and continued right on through and erupted onto the surface through little bridges like these and just came up onto the surface and became scrambled. These kinds of heterotopias, or cell groups that are in the wrong places, are typical of fetal alcohol syndrome and would suggest that alcohol dramatically interferes with cell migrations early in brain development.
Alcohol and radiation are just two examples of teratogens. When present during critical periods of development, they can adversely affect the brain. Both kill newly emerging brain cells. During cell migration, alcohol causes neurons to continue growing past their destinations. Radiation stops them short of their target. Both interfere with the crucial timing of development.
After migration, the process of development continues. Around the 18th week, the brain begins to stabilize itself. At 21 weeks, the auditory cortex begins to function. At 26 weeks, the visual cortex links up. Witness this microcosm of normal brain development. These three neurons are sending out fibers, trying to form a network of cells. At the end of each fiber is a growth cone, a tiny fluttering tip that depends on chemical signals to find its way. Normally, the brain produces far more neurons than it actually needs. Sometimes they succeed in linking up, sometimes they fail. For these three neurons, the process is simple. One of them dies. The other two form a connection. The scene, repeated countless times in the developing brain, leads to a network of neurons of incredible complexity. The evolution from a single fertilized egg is complete.
Reflexes like the palmar grasp, stepping, Morrow, and Babinski are an inborn automatic response, nature's toolkit to help an infant adapt to the world. Many reflexes, breathing, swallowing, and sucking, for example, have survival value. Other more primitive reflexes like the Morrow and grasping are considered leftovers from our evolutionary heritage. Survival reflexes usually become voluntary at some point during the first year, while the primitive reflexes disappear.
Anthony, go back down for a second. So pretty much losing that. So should we draw as and the toe goes up and fans out, just like that?
Some reflexes are predominantly related to the nourishment of the infant. Here, in response to stroking at the corner of Aiden's mouth, we see the rooting reflex. 1-week-old Aiden turns his head and opens his mouth. He roots in the direction of the stroking. This helps the infant find the breast or bottle and begin feeding. Sucking is another reflex that helps the infant find food. Aiden will instinctively suck on any object that is placed in his mouth, including the doctor's finger.
Some reflexes are predominantly related to the protection of the infant. Stroking the palm of Mackenzie's hand will cause her to close her hands and fingers in a grasp. The grasping reflex may be so strong that the baby can support her own weight.
The Morrow or startle reflex is seen when support for the head and neck is suddenly lost, or in response to a loud noise or sudden movement. Here, 1-week-old Aiden throws his arms out and back in response to the doctor's sudden drop of his hands. The Morrow reflex, which should be fully present at birth, begins to disappear at around 5 months of age. Jessipina, who is just 2 months old, has already begun to lose the Morrow reflex. Absence of the Morrow reflex at birth or reappearance after the normal age of disappearance, approximately 5 months, may suggest damage to the central nervous system.
So she doesn't have a startle anymore. It's gone.
Okay.
She's matured and she's overriding that.
Some reflexes, such as the stepping reflex, are related to postural control. When held upright with her feet just touching a flat surface, 2.5-week-old Olivia appears to take steps and walk. This reflex, which typically disappears at around 2 to 3 months of age, will not be seen again until Olivia learns to walk on her own.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Let's do that a little better. Let me hold you this way so people can see you. Okay. So she stands, and there like that. She'll start taking some steps. And you can get it to, if you sort of touch the top of her foot, she'll pick up a little bit there, like that.
Reflexes are also used to identify normal brain activity. Absence, persistence beyond the normal time for disappearance, or the reappearance of a reflex later in life is suggestive of significant neurological problems. For example, the Babinski reflex, exhibited here by Olivia when the bottom of her foot is stroked, causes the big toe to flex towards the top of the foot and the other toes to fan out. The Babinski is normal in children under 2 years of age. After 2 years of age, the presence of the Babinski indicates damage to the nerve paths connecting the spinal cord and the brain.
Hey everyone, it is Mrs. Kendall, and this is the second lecture for development, which is the first part of Unit 4. I know that there's been some issues with my Class Connect classroom, so we are working on that. But yeah, basically, sometimes you guys come into a room and I'm not there, but I'm in my room and you're not there. So we're working on it. In the meantime, I will continue to record the lectures so that you can watch them. So we talked about physical development, and now we're going to talk about the social, the cognitive, the social development theory, and also moral development, which is not on this list. So this is actually a funny joke that you will get after we get through this. You mean to tell me you don't go anywhere when we play peekaboo? And that has to do with Piaget. So let's first talk about social development. Up until about a year, infants don't mind strange people. Maybe because everyone is strange to them. So you can see under a year-old sitting with Santa. He's obviously strange. You know, they don't know him, or this little girl doesn't know him, but there's no reaction. At about a year, an infant develops stranger anxiety. So now kid is freaking out at Santa. So the question becomes, why do you think that this starts at about a year? And that's not really something we're going to answer, but these are the types of questions that stage development psychologists focus on. So stage theorists, these psychologists believe that we travel from stage to stage throughout our lifetimes. So cognitive development is where we're going to start. And cognitive, remember, this is your brain, your thinking, your thought process. And I know that we've talked about it on several other occasions, but when are you mentally capable of doing certain things? And what we do know from studying neuropsychology is that the brain is not fully developed until, depending on age, but usually in the 20s. For girls, it's early 20s. For boys, it's mid-20s. So we want to look at this cognitive development, and what's happening is Piaget and all these development theorists came up with their theories before we were able to start studying the brain. So now we're having to mesh these things together. So cognitive development, it was just once thought that kids were just stupid versions of adults. I'm sorry, there's no nicer way to say that, but that used to be the belief even 50, 60 years ago. Then came Piaget, Jean Piaget, and he said, no, that's just not true. And this is actually Piaget, and if you read about him, he's just described as this really happy, jovial, little old man, like, one of those cute little old men. But he was just, kids were drawn to him. He really loved kids. And what he argued is that kids learn differently than adults. It's not that they're stupid, but just that they do things differently and they see the world differently. And what he said is that learning happens when things don't fit our schema. So we're going to have to talk about schemas. We will get to schemas, but I want to talk about Piaget's stages. There are 4 stages in Piaget, and we're going to talk about each one of these. So stage 1, sensory motor, stage 2, pre-operational, stage 3, concrete operational, and stage 4, formal operational. And you can see that the years vary. Birth to 2, 2 to 7, 7 to 10, and age 11 through adulthood. Sensory motor, object permanence, is the major milestone.
Okay. Hey, look, Lucy. Look. It's the clippers. Go get them. Where are they? No idea. There are the clippers. Look at the clippers. Where'd they go? There they are. Good girl. Look at Wally trying to edge his way into the van.
Again with the eating of the clippers. Seriously.
In pre-operational, 2 to 7, they have object permanence. They begin to use language to represent objects and ideas. So language is really symbolic. And they start to get that type of thinking, that they know that if they say dog, that language represents a dog or the idea of a dog. They are very egocentric. They literally cannot look at the world through the eyes of anyone else but their own. So if you have younger siblings or you've been around kids aged 2 to 7, this is why my sister does this one all the time with my nieces, and I kind of laugh at her, but she'll be like, Mommy's on the phone. Can you go do something else until Mommy's done with this important phone call? And my nieces don't get that because they can't see the world through my sister's eyes. They can only see the world through their eyes. So that's what egocentric is. And watch this little boy and pay attention to how egocentric he is.
Can you tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl?
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat?
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
Okay, so can you tell me what you see from that?
Okay, so as you could see, or you witnessed, he couldn't describe what she was seeing. He could only describe what he was seeing, what was on his side of the table. So that's egocentric. So that is a natural part of that 2 to 7. And again, that varies. The range can be, 3 to 8, or, it varies from kid to kid, but it's generally 2 to 7.
Can you tell me what you see
They
when you
also
look
do
at that from
not
where you're
have an
sitting?
understanding of
What
the
are some of the things that you
concept of
see?
conservation. So now we need to talk about what conservation is.
Can you tell me what you
Conservation
see when you look at that from where you're
the quantity
sitting?
remains the same.
What are some of the things that you see?
Despite any changes in appearance, and it's a part of logical thinking.
A
So,
cat?
probably the simplest way to explain this is if you take a
Okay,
large
now we're going to
pizza
do the
and
same
you cut it
thing.
in
Can you
4
tell me what you
slices,
see when you look at it from that
and then
stool?
you take another large pizza and you cut it in 8 slices, both the 4 slice and the 8
An
slice
owl?
have the same amount of pizza. That's
What is
conservation.
that?
In this stage,
A
the
goat?
2 to 7-year-olds
Okay,
don't
is there anything else you
understand
see?
that. So let's look at some
Right there, what is
examples
that?
of conservation.
A tree.
A tree.
Oh, or we're not, because that's the wrong video. So I will put up the link to the right video, but probably the best explanation of this is water in two different size and shape glasses. You can pour the same amount of water in a big, short, fat glass as in a tall, skinny glass, and they will assume that there's more water in one than the other because of the shape and size. They don't understand that it's the same amount of water. Okay, so here, continuous quantity. So here's the initial presentation. They change it to a tall, skinny one. And the pre-operational kid will tell you the tall, skinny one has more water. Or in numbers, if you've got two lines of checkers, they're going to think that the longer line means more checkers. Lumps of clay. If you squeeze one into a long, thin shape, they'll think the longer, thin one has more mass. There's more of it. And then length. Sticks. If you have two identical sticks and you put them down and put one in, like, move one, and then ask them which one is longer, they'll think the one that's moved the furthest is the longer one. So these are tests of conservation, and if you have 2 to 7 year olds that you can play around with a little bit, do some of these on them, and they'll see it as a game. There's no right or wrong. They don't know yet, but it is interesting to see, and I see the continuous quantity all the time with my nieces. I know, I'll babysit them and I'll open a pop for each of them and I'll pour them in different glasses, and one will complain that the other one got more pop, and really they didn't. So you can definitely see this in 2 to 7 year olds. Okay, then we move into concrete operational stage. And by concrete operational, they know conservation. They know that you're tricking them and there's the same amount of liquid or same amount of pizza or the sticks are the same length. They're starting to use logic. So, penguins are black and white. Some old TV shows are black and white. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. They can look at that and say, no. Logic tells us another thing that penguins aren't very good at is, they're making a joke about logic. So they have logical skills. They know that just because a penguin's black and white, that it's not an old TV show. They have learned to think logically.
Can you look at these two glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice?
Inductive reasoning skills.
You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass.
Okay, there's the conservation video. So I will try to figure this out and get the right videos up for you guys. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, last stage is formal operation, and this is where you guys are. This is abstract reasoning. This is manipulating objects in our minds without seeing them. So we can look at our room and say, what if I move my bed over there and my desk over there? So we can start doing that in our heads without actually moving them. We can test a hypothesis. We can say, I believe that this will happen because of this, and we can test that. We learn by trial and error. So you do something, it doesn't work, you try something else. There's what's called metacognition, and that, it's a complicated term, but basically metacognition means you're thinking about how you think. So you can look at your learning process and adjust because you know how you learn best or how you think best. Not every adult fully gets through this stage. And without, naming in particular people in your lives, you can probably think of a couple of people that you can question whether they fully made it through this stage. Okay, so what are criticisms of Piaget? And there, of course, are criticisms of Piaget as there are with any theorist. So some say that he underestimates the abilities of kids. Which I find ironic because before Piaget, they just thought that kids were stupid. But anyway, they say that he underestimates what kids are able to do, that kids actually do more complex thinking than he gives them credit for. And he overlooked the theory of mind concept, the ability to take the viewpoint of somebody else. Example, to be able to tell when somebody is teasing and when they're not teasing. So he overlooked that. So just know that there are criticisms of Piaget, and especially as we move away from him in time. Okay, Vygotsky versus Piaget. Vygotsky was another one who was social development theory. He said that social interaction has a role in cognitive development.
Piaget argued development precedes learning, holding that we interpret the world through mental schema, allowing us to make sense of our environment. Learning happens when facing situations our mental schema cannot easily process, leading to disequilibrium. To re-equalize itself, the mind either assimilates new information or adapts to using new skills. Piaget calls this process of assimilating new information and skills into our pre-developed schema learning. Vygotsky agrees that learning happens by interacting with our environment. However, counter to Piaget, Vygotsky argues that learning precedes development. He holds that our present state of development is enhanced when confronted with new tasks just out of reach of our present abilities. The gap between our pre-existing development and what we can accomplish with the help of others is called the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky focuses on how proper instruction raises our ability through the ZPD as we internalize new information and skills. Learning takes place in the ZPD and precedes individual development. Piaget's theory deals more with states of development and mental schema, in line with Kant. Vygotsky's dialectical theory focuses mainly upon how instruction and society at large impacts learning, in line with Marx and Hegel. I find Vygotsky's theory more valuable as an educator because it focuses on the role teachers and society play in student learning and development.
Okay, so you can see, and I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of questions on Vygotsky, and we don't really delve that deeply into zone of proximal development or theory of mind, but I did want you to be aware of them. Okay, schemas. This is something that we're just finally going to assign words for. You know what schemas are, and you just don't know that you know. So a schema, children view the world through schema, as do adults for the most part. So schemas are the way that we interpret the world around us. So right now in your head, picture a model. Don't let your head jump around. What's the first image that you get for a model? Probably one of something like this, right? Depending on your preference. Maybe something like this. So that probably fits most of our schemas, our concept of what a model is. Does that fit our schema? No, not really. She used to freak out my kids. So, but does this one? So it is basically what you picture in your mind, in your head, when you think of something. So if I say pen or cell phone or computer or stapler, whatever pops in your head is your schema. So what happens when we encounter new information that doesn't fit into our schemas? That is learning. Okay, so let me repeat that. When we encounter new information that doesn't fit into our schemas, then we have to learn it. And we can do that through assimilation or accommodation. So assimilation is where we incorporate the new experience into our existing schema. So if I teach my 3-year-old that an animal has 4 legs and a tail, that an animal with 4 legs and a tail is a dog, this is what she pictures. Okay? Right? 4 legs and a tail. So what would that 3-year-old do with that? Uh-oh. Right? So now she has to do something with that. She's learning. So if she just accepts that into her existing schemas, that's assimilation. Or what about this? See, you have a schema for that, but a 3-year-old may not. So what schema would you assimilate this into? Okay, right now you're learning. You're probably freaking out and cringing. In the live classroom, my kids were like, please change it, turn it off. But this doesn't fit your schemas, right? It looks like a dog. It kind of looks human. What is it, right? So you have to figure out what to do with that, and you have to assimilate it into your new schemas. Assimilation in high school, and I'm assuming that most of you have had some type of brick and mortar experience. If you haven't, then you've watched TV and you probably at least get the stereotypes. So pretend you're in a brick and mortar and you first meet someone. You will assimilate them into a schema that you already have. Okay? If you see these 2 guys dressed like that, what schema would you assimilate them into? You're going to put them in one of your schemas that you already have. Are you always going to be right? Probably not. Okay, then there's accommodation. And this is where we change our schema to adopt the new information. So if I tell someone from the Midwest to picture their schema of the Bronx, okay, so anyone from anywhere else in the United States other than New York, what do you think of when you think of the Bronx? Probably something like that, right? Well, what do you do with this? You now have to change for new information because guess what? The pictures at the top are not the Bronx. The cool pictures with the lion and the pretty park and the pretty houses, that's the Bronx. So you have to accommodate or change your schema to incorporate the new information. And if I remember correctly, the pictures at the top are Gary, Indiana, and the pictures in the, towards the bottom, those are the Bronx. So that's accommodation. You're changing your existing schema to adopt that new information.
Watch.
Okay, so what happens when your schemas don't work?
You see, that fella there has taken his girl to the bowling alleys. And first he's going to show her how it's done, you see. Now, no matter how well he throws that ball, he's not going to get a strike or a spare.
Before any of us were alive.
Well, not bad for him, but he's pretty good. Now, the girl just came along to be polite.
Think about what is
but
the
we'll
schema,
help her a little bit, like
what
this.
doesn't fit, and why doesn't it fit? And then what can you do? What are the men in this
You
video
watch,
going
in
to
each
do with
case,
the new
at
information?
first, the good bowler is sort of nice to his partner. You know, he's glad she gets a good break like this. Now, each time she throws a ball low, and each time she gets lucky, watch how he gets a little cooler. Now, you have to visualize what brought these two to the bowling alleys. Mama said, look, I don't want to go. My arm hurts me. This is your sport. Leave me alone. But he said, come on, honey. You'll enjoy it, and I'll show you how to do it. Now she's going to throw that ball.
Okay, so it's not fitting his schema. What doesn't fit? The idea that this woman is bowling this well, and not only that, but where she's hitting, more pens are falling than should. So he's going to have to figure out what to do with that information.
See? Now look at how cheerful he is. She's holding her arm. Notice that? But that won't stop her for the next few balls. But I want you to watch the husband, because see how encouraging he is now? But with each succeeding ball, watch him get a little bit chillier each and every time. And she acts like it's all so easy, you know. I don't know what the fuss is about this game. Anybody? Now, the last ball, I think you'll see him partially hidden by his son's head. But watch the eyes. Well, she's got one more to throw.
Look at the confidence.
Yeah, she acts like, you know, I can't imagine. What's so hard? And the kid says, see, she's got the touch now. And Papa says, well, it isn't as easy as all this. But in this, I think this is the last ball. And watch Dad, his eyes practically go down the alley with the ball. Watch.
Okay, so obviously it doesn't fit the schema. They've got to figure out what doesn't fit and why, and what do they do with that new information. So kind of a funny video, and honestly, you guys, there's so much in our lives that is funny because it doesn't fit our schemas. If any of you, and I don't want to encourage this behavior, but if any of you go anywhere to, say, people watch, you're looking for people who don't fit your schemas and then trying to figure out what the heck. So this is how we learn. So short little video on Erikson.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now you should have somehow realized what you gotta do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that lead us there are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. Because maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall. Today was gonna be the day, but they'll never throw it back to you. By now you should have somehow realized what you're not to do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads that lead you there were winding, and all the lights that light the way are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. I said maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall. I said maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall. I said maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. You're gonna be the one that saves me. You're gonna be the one that saves me.
So I think that that is a great video for moving through each of Erikson's stages and understanding them. Like I said, in the assignment explanation, I go through each stage and I really talk about what's going on in each stage, what's the conflict, and what happens if it resolves well, and what happens if it doesn't resolve well. So here are the stages. You're actually going to see this again in the assignment instruction. So trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame or doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and then finally, in later stages of life, ego integrity versus despair. And I think this is the easiest one to understand if you've done all of these other ones well, when you get to the later years of your life, you either are ready to pass on and you're content with your life and you don't have major regrets, or you're afraid of dying and you're full of regrets. And so when you get to that last stage, if you have despair, then that means there were probably issues in earlier stages. So you can really see it and understand it that way. For example, identity and role confusion. This is probably where most teenagers are. So pay attention when you go through the assignment recording, because I do spend time on each of these. Okay, moral development. And this is Lawrence Kohlberg, and this is actually one of my favorite ones to teach, because our ethics and our morals have to develop from somewhere. So pre-conventional, he says that there are 3 stages. He says the first one is pre-conventional morality. And this is morality based on punishments and rewards. You do things either because you're punished or rewarded, and that's what's guiding what's right or wrong for you. So you don't rob a bank because you go to jail. That's pre-conventional morality. If you're rewarded, then it's okay. And if you're punished, then the act must be wrong. You don't think of it outside of that. So people who are stuck in pre-conventional morality that haven't moved on to the next stage, if you get a reward, it's okay. If you get a punishment, it's bad. It is that black and white. They don't see beyond that. So police, jury of your peers, this is the next step. It's gone beyond just reward or punishment. Now it's if society or your family or your church or your just a group tells you that it's wrong, then so do you. You believe it's wrong. Probably the most interesting conversation that I ever had in a class about this was actually a U.S. history class, and we were talking about laws and how laws aren't always right, that throughout history, things have been legal that weren't right. So you can compare it to conventional or post-conventional. The law said that it was okay to tell black people that they couldn't come into your business, or tell them that they couldn't sit at the lunch counter, or tell them that they couldn't go to the same school as white kids. The law said that was okay, but it didn't mean that it was actually okay. So what the law said was conventional, and then the people who saw beyond the law were using post-conventional morality. So we were discussing this in class, and I had a student say, well, it's never okay to break the law. Okay, well, he is obviously in conventional morality. And some of the kids in the class challenged him and said, that's silly. You know, the law is a parameter, but sometimes, it makes sense to break the law. And they were throwing all sorts of situations out at him. And one of the kids finally said, okay, what if it is the middle of the night, you're all grown up, your wife is pregnant, she's in the car beside you, she's having a baby, you're driving in the middle of the night, there's no one on the roads, and you come to a red light. And the student said he would sit at the red light. And all the other students in the class freaked out on him. They were like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Or, what if your wife's dying? And he's like, it's a red light. And the other kids were just they were post-conventional morality. They were looking at it saying, well, your wife's going to die, dude. Really? You're going to sit through a red light? And he was like, yes, I am. And so then the kids started playing with it. Well, if there's nobody coming, would you come to a stop, look around, and then go? And he's like, no. And it was just a really interesting conversation. And I was able to take that from American history and bring it into psychology, because that is the difference between conventional and post-conventional. Post-conventional morality, someone in that stage was that student saying, nope, it's a red light. You can't go. You can't do it. And my other students in that class were obviously post-conventional, at least on that issue. And they were saying, look, your wife's dying, dude. You run the red light. And honestly, if a cop pulls you over, he's probably going to escort you anyway. So interesting. And Kohlberg, and I wish that we had more time for this, because Kohlberg actually wrote a story where he thought he could measure where people were in their morality development. And it's a really cool story. Okay, so obviously criticisms of Kohlberg. Well, Carol Gilligan pointed out that Kohlberg only tested boys. Okay, so when we go back and we think about representative sample, this is not a representative sample. Boys tend to have more of an absolute value of morality, and what that means is boys have a line that they draw, or men, that yes, this is okay, and everything on the other side is not, whereas the female gender has more gray areas. Okay, so boys have this absolute value and girls do not. Girls have more gray. Girls look at the situation. They start weighing in other things like, okay, it was the middle of the night, there's no traffic. If a cop pulls you over, he's probably going to escort you. The wife is dying. Whereas boys are just like, no, the light's red. And I'm not saying that that's all boys or males, but they tend to have more often than not, more often than girls, that absolute value. Okay, attachment. And this kind of jumps out of nowhere. Sorry about this. The most important social construct of an infant must be to develop an attachment, a bond with a caregiver. We know this. Children who are deprived of attachment have problems developmentally the rest of their lives in numerous areas. Social, cognitive, moral, all sorts of areas. Lorenz discovered that some animals form attachment through imprinting. Imprinting, certain birds and mammals form attachments during a very critical period, very early in their lives. Okay, so imprinting. Critical period meaning, so between the ages of this and this, imprinting must take place, or development will not happen as it should. Sorry. In order to form attachment.
Hey, we're the monkeys, and people say we monkey around, but we're too busy singing to put anybody down.
Harry Harlow was definitely not monkeying around when he set out to discover how monkeys formed attachment with their mothers. What he did was, he put baby monkeys in a cage with two kinds of mothers, a cloth mother and a wired mesh mother. And what he discovered was, no matter what, the infant monkey was always more attached to the mother that had soft cloth around it. It would always run to the mother and say, "Oh, mother, I want to touch you," and the monkey ignored the wired mesh mother. Before Harry Harlow came along, it was thought that babies formed attachment by giving babies food. In other words, if you gave a baby some food, it became attached to you. But Harry Harlow wanted to prove this, see if it was correct. So what he did was he first put two monkeys in a cage, the cloth mother with a nipple and some milk, and the wire mother with a nipple with some milk. And of course the baby was more attracted to the cloth mother with the nipple. But then he put a nipple on the wire mesh mother. And he wanted to see no nipple on the cloth mesh mother. And he wanted to see if the monkey was more attracted to the food or the soft touch of the cloth mother. And to his surprise, the monkey always went to the mother with the soft touch, only to reach over to grab some food, but run back to the soft touch mother, showing us that touch is very important in forming attachment. Next, Harlow wanted to show that baby monkeys, in response to fear, would always jump to the cloth mother. In this case, he put looks like a bear with a drum, and the monkey got freaked out and jumped to the cloth mother. I mean, I would jump too. It looks like something out of a Stephen King movie. So in fear, the monkey would always jump to the cloth mother. What you'll notice in the video is the monkey would go to the cloth mother, hold the mother for comfort, and then reach out to explore the new or fearful stimulus. So here the monkey would reach for the mom. Oh, mom, touch me. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. And then he would reach out to see what was scaring him. Always going back for comfort in the cloth mother, showing that touch, once again, just physical touch, is critical in the formation of some kind of attachment. Just a quick side note. They've also been able to correlate physical touch not just with attachment, but show that physical touch during infancy and during critical periods of your life is also important in developing cognitive abilities. They've done studies with orphans, and the orphans that have been physically touched at young ages were actually at higher cognitive abilities when they were in their teenage years. Next, Harry Harlow got kind of mean. What he did was he put a monkey in a room that was raised by a cloth mother without the cloth mother and introduced the baby to stimuli it wasn't used to. I think it gave the baby like a little cloth pillow, and it maybe gave the baby some new tools like a barrel or a box that he's never seen before. So the baby became frightened. And you'll notice that when he brings the cloth mother in the room, the baby goes directly right to the cloth mother because he's scared of the other stimuli. Look, hey mommy, quick, quick, and grabs the mommy, looking at the other items. What's really important to note here is the monkey wants to explore because it has an attachment with the mother. So the monkey will slowly peek out from under the mother into the side of the mother and explore the other items in the room that it's curious about, like a little kind of Curious George-like. So he would look around, but always within reach of the mother, because it's developed an attachment to the mother, but not through food, just through physical touch. Once again, physical touch has created that bond between the baby monkey and the mother. So look, it's exploring the items. What's this? It's a log post, and jumping back to the mother for security, because that's where the attachment lies. You'll notice as time goes by, the baby monkey gets more curious and more daring. But the baby monkey could not be this daring if it didn't form an attachment through the mother. So look, the baby monkey is now really exploring different parts of the room and bringing things back to mom. Mommy, look at this. Look what I got. It's a piece of paper. That's cool. I think I love it. I love it so much. I love you too, Mommy. Mommy, but I love you. Hold me. Hold me. Hold me in the paper. We're going to be together. Oh, Mommy, hold me. But don't look at this. Turn around, Mommy. Turn away. Oh, see, Mommy can't see this. But as you can see, the monkey does have a definite attachment with the mother. Then Harry Harlow took the cloth mother away from the monkey that was raised by the cloth mother. And you'll watch how the monkey, when the mother's not there, cowers in the corner in fear, waiting for the mother to return. It was really, and you'll notice when the mother comes back, it will jump directly to the mother to hold it because it's formed that attachment through touch. Watch, here comes the mother. Oh, Mom! There, you see? It's there. The attachment has been formed. Monkeys that were raised with no cloth mother but only a wire mesh mother and didn't form that bond through physical touch felt no comfort when a cloth mother was brought into a room in a strange environment. Watch. When the cloth mother comes in to a monkey that was not raised with a cloth mother, there's no response. Here comes the monkey. There's no response to the mother. It's interesting to note that monkeys that were raised without wire mothers or cloth mothers had really a hard time developing any type of attachment. Oftentimes they couldn't mate and they were very aggressive. Now, two things you take from Harlow's experiment. First, physical touch is critical in developing attachment. Second, if you don't attach during the critical period of your life, it's possible you might never form proper attachment.
Okay. So that is Harlow and attachment, and I'm not going to lie, this is one of my favorite videos because I love his speaking for the monkeys. It cracks me up. So that gives you a little bit of insight into my personality. But basically it does show that creatures and humans need touch to form attachments, and how important that is. Critical periods is the optimal period shortly after birth when an organism, so a monkey, a human, a whatever, their exposure to certain stimuli or experiences produces proper development. So this is not just about attachment. this is at any time and can be applied to like language or whatever, that there are periods that happen in our lives that when we're exposed to the stimuli or experiences produce the development that we're supposed to, and there are set time periods for each of those things. And language is definitely one of these, but we're talking about it in regards to attachment here. Those who are deprived of touch have trouble forming attachment when they are older. We know this through research. Okay, parenting styles. And this is Baumrind. There are 3 types of parenting. There's authoritarian parents who impose rules, you don't break them. This is military. This is the rule, don't break it. No explanation, no discussion. This is just what it is. Okay, drill sergeant. Permissive parents have few demands and there are little punishments. So they're kind of the opposite. And then we have authoritative parenting. And this is demanding and responsive. You have rules, but they're explained, and you encourage open discussion. We know through watching kids and studying the research and doing research that children are more productive when they have authoritative parents. Authoritarian and permissive resulting in kids with issues. So probably the best way to explain this is you are grounded and your parents go out and you decide that since they're not home, you're going to sneak out. Okay, authoritarian parents are just going to ground you longer. There's no discussion about it. Permissive parents probably don't care. They're like, you really shouldn't have done that. Okay, we're done. And authoritative parents are going to sit down with you and they're going to be like, we had a rule. You were grounded. You weren't supposed to go anywhere. It was for your safety. But why'd you do it? And there's going to be a discussion. Authoritative parenting is the preferred style of parenting, preferred by psychologists. Okay, so that is the end of Lecture 2. The password for Lecture 2, you're going to send this to me via K-mail so that I know that you watched this, is Stage Theorist. So to get credit for watching this lecture, go ahead and send that to me. If you have any questions or concerns, you know where to find me. Thanks, guys.